Well, for the few of you that are actually interested in our trip, here's an overview of our approximately 3 weeks in the Mediterranean. Here's our flight over to Frankfurt and then on to Rome, where we waited in this line. We got to our apartment, found an elevator. Thankfully, I got to carry these things up. Here's our apartment from the outside. It was wonderful. Here's our apartment from the inside. We then got a little hungry for a snack, grabbed some shawarma in some square. Not this one, but a different one. And then this square had another church, which, look at that. We found some real food a little later at a nice authentic pizza, and then drank some authentic city water. Went back to that square when it was more crowded, and then we wandered around the city, stumbled upon the Pantheon and the big door that it had. Then we found a random square near our apartment, and then some random ruins the next day, and a big white building with lots of stairs. I'm sure it's important. Not as important as these ruins. And I believe this was the Roman Forum, which is right near here, which is the famous Colosseum, which we stood in front of, not within, because we were too lazy to wait in a long line or buy the tickets ahead. But we did find this underground thing that had nice paintings on the wall. And then wandering aimlessly, we stumbled upon the Circus Maximus, very important place, and this weird water fountain thing next to a church, which had another nice ceiling. And here's a view from outside of that church, and yes, it was hot, extremely hot, almost hottest day of the year, I believe. Here's our trapdoor entrance back to our apartment, random alleyway we found, nice old car in front of some random building, and then we walked over towards the Vatican and some castle thing, and there's the Vatican, Vatican City, which we tried to get a tour on the inside of the Sistine Chapel, but it was closed. And here we are at the fountain that has lots of people standing around watching people stare at water, and we did the same thing. And then we found another church to look at the cool ceilings, and then got some dinner. It was pretty good. Now we have to head to our ship after 2 days in Rome, which was our Oosterdam trip, 14 days traveling through all these places, which I'm now going to tell you about. There's the ship. Well, once on board, first place was those comfy chairs in the front, and then we sailed away. Beautiful sunset. We're going to start now with our tour in Naples and Sorrento. We had some hitchhikers on our life raft. We got off, stood in front of some castle, went inside, and there's a big ceiling, and here is the king of the castle himself. Look at that power. We had enough in Naples, went over to Sorrento. Beautiful, beautiful place, nice picture, lots of stairs, walking around. She wanted to go to the limoncello, I believe you call it, factory thing, store, and she did. We had some authentic gelato, which was delicious. Stood in front of another random door, pretended to knock on it. Took some pictures of Mount Vesuvius in the background and Sorrento in the foreground. Then on our way back down, took a different staircase down back to the bottom. And then in Naples, we were hungry. We found some random alleyway, picked a good pizza restaurant out of the way, non-touristy, had delicious, authentic margarita and the other pizza that I forgot the name of. Here's the front. Here we are sailing away again, stowaway birds, also Vesuvius. Our elevators tells us what day it is. Beautiful sunset or possibly sunrise. Nope, sunset. There we are standing in front of it. And now our next day is Taormina, I believe you say it, Naxos. And there is Mount Etna, which just blew its top a couple weeks back. Here's a random alley entranceway, beautiful architecture, lots of walking around. We got to the top of some city park and saw beautiful views. Stood in front of old buildings, stood in front of random alleyways, walkways, lots of schlock being sold. Here's a Roman amphitheater or theater. Ruins were cool to look at. There's a sign telling us where we were. Found a city park that had beautiful trees, good picture spots, nice overlook. There's our boat in the background, and there's the mile walkway that we got dropped at the wrong place and walked a long way to get back to our tender, to get back to our ship. Beautiful calm seas, beautiful no clouds, and now we're going to eat some dinner on the ship and take a beautiful sunset picture for this stop. All right, now we're on to Athens, Greece, where we took a hop-on, hop-off bus over to the Acropolis and the Parthenon, which we saw from a distance, saw some more ruins, saw some ruins up close, walked around a market area, had some hero, and then we got back on the ship after fighting a lot of traffic. Next day, Katakolon, small stop. Most people went to Olympia. We did not. We took a little fake train over to a fake winery that had no grapes, but they did have wine, surprisingly, and we did try some. It was kind of bitter. Here's the winery we went to. I have no idea what that says. And then we found a little beach stop from our fake train trip. And then back at the port area, we read some ancient Greek philosophy, stood with a big bird, and then we got ready to sail out. And of course, another day, another meal, delicious food on the Holland Oosterdam. Another day with no clouds. And it was a day at sea, so we learned about how the ship moves and other stuff. Now we're on to Malta. So I go down to a Malta, and here we are at the entrance. There's our boat again with a paper boat next to it. We took this elevator thing up to the top, and here we are at the top. Very cool city. We took a fort walk around, and we saw the knights, the old knights with the cannons, and there's a door fit for her. And then we walked around the city of Malta. We saw their famous balcony things and a sign that has their name on it. Then we went to the museum that has all the information about the knights, and they have a beautiful ceiling. And then we saw the history of England with the telephone booths, the impact that it had on Malta, and another walking stop. We got fired on by a cannon on our way out of the port, and now we're headed on to Tunis, Tunisia. Here's our entry into the port of Tunis. There's our tour bus today with words I can't read. We first came across the Carthage ruins, some of the Punic ruins that were underneath someone's house they had no idea about. There's some fake made in China stuffed animals. And here's the architecture in the place I forgot the name of. And there's some gift shop, which they made these bowls allegedly. And then we found an American cemetery in North Africa and got to the top of a picture spot with some ruins. Very important from back when the Carthaginians, I believe you say. There's our tour guide. He was awesome. Showed us all the ancient Carthage and Punic impacts and Roman impacts as they Roman bath. We were on the bottom part of it where they heated up the water. And then we saw some carvings that somehow they miraculously did thousands of years ago. And now we're on to Cagliari in Sardinia. Here's our entrance. Here's a building with lots of stairs. That was like a tourist entry building today. We walked around, not that impressed with the city, but we did find a hat that had its name on it and staircases with lots of graffiti. And here's a building with a really ugly lady standing in her balcony and a nice picture spot at the top of some random monument slash tall building. Here's a very narrow walkway. And we went to an archaeological museum and saw, I believe, Caesar, possibly. And then we walked around. We saw a tuk-tuk. And then we found a crypt that we walked inside and hung out for a few minutes inside the crypt. Then got back on the boat, and we sailed away. Off to our next stop. All right, off to Cartagena, Spain. Here we are pulling in. I'm going to use another word other than beautiful to describe the sunset. It was breathtaking. Here's a building, and then some city art with some fish on it. We took a water, drank some more city water, saw some peacocks, and then we stumbled upon this Roman theater. Not the amphitheater, but the theater. And we saw the picture of the ship, took a picture with ourselves. Then we got into a museum at the top of a city park, the fake Mona Lisa probably, and more peacocks at this park. We then walked back down to town, stood in front of a wall, went to the main street, took a picture with the statue, and then we started walking around the Calle Mayor, I believe it was called. Saw some beautiful architecture and a lady playing a harp. Then we went to the more ruins. A lot of ruins. These ruins had lots of descriptions, tell us what they used to be. They still look like buildings. They were nicer than this building, though. And now, here we are with another fancy door and a big cannon aimed possibly at our ship. And then we took a tour of the Cartagena Naval Museum, I believe it was called, this 1800s submarine and a big statue of whatever that was. And here's our exit out of Cartagena. Great place, nice little day. And here is our next stop, which is Tangier in Morocco. Here's the spot where Europe and Africa are only a couple miles away from each other. We saw it up close. There's the door inside the Casbah, and we saw some beautiful Moorish architecture, and we walked around the Medina and got an understanding of how they make some of the clothing and the materials and rugs and things. Got harassed by a lot of vendors trying to sell us stuff, everything made in China, I believe. And then we had some mint tea, which was nice, and some cookies. There's our useless tour guide. She was definitely not good. And here's some pigs wandering around. And this is the point where the ocean of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean meet. We took our obligatory picture. Not sure we could tell the difference. And there's a mosque with a bunch of people leaving after praying. Here's our flag, and goodbye with a delicious steak dinner with some onboard credit. Let's move on to Lisbon. And here we are entering the harbor with the fake Golden Gate Bridge. It kind of looks like San Francisco. We love you, Lisboa. And let's go take a tour, walk around, see some random streamers and mosaic walls in front of another door. Here's some more graffiti. Another day, more graffiti. Nice stairs. Here's our cable car experience. We did not go on it. Too crowded, but we almost got hit by one. Here's a square we walked into. We just kind of wandered around, stumbled upon this Portugal official soccer store, and had to push her up these hills. And then she started complaining big time about her ankle, and this is what we saw at the top after walking. She was not in love with me at that very moment, as you can tell. But then we got to go to the castle and took a tour, saw some ancient ruins, and then walked around, walked to the top, at least the two of us, not her. Saw some beautiful views of the city, pretended that we were back in olden times, saw our ship. She needed to get some liquor, so we bought her the local variety, which I forgot the name of it, but she liked it. And then one final random hallway, stairway to get back to our ship. And this is the end. There's our luggage. You'll need to know about that later. We got and checked into a hotel for a day in Lisbon, took a soccer tour of a soccer stadium with no grass, but they did let us sit in the press booth, and then took the museum tour where we got to pretend that we were champions and breaking city roads. Then we went over to the Lisbon Zoo and saw more peacocks and a family and a interesting zebra. Took this cool sky ride, but no seats though. And then stood in front of this picture with wings. Saw a terrific, probably the best ever dolphin show we've ever seen, and stood in front of a sign that I have no idea what it says. Ate our final meal in Lisbon, a nice Mexican dinner, and walked around a fancy street road, and then we got some breakfast for the morning at the grocery store, and there's the last time we'll see our bags possibly ever. So we get to the airport, we board our plane, we fly out of Lisbon. All's great until we get into Washington, D.C., and then our flight is canceled home. So they put us in a terrible hotel with a broken desk and bad smell at 4 o'clock in the morning. Got back to the airport to find our bags were not going to be getting on the plane with us. Flew out, and there's our trip. We're still waiting for our suitcases to arrive. Thank you.